He's breaking into my house. Vivian Baxter storms my porch with a ridiculous sense of entitlement, waving around what she dramatically calls a master key, a cheap, neon green piece of plastic she clearly bought off some sketchy website. She screams that it opens every house in our neighborhood, declaring it like she's some kind of suburban locksmith savior. But her key, glowing like a kid's toy from a vending machine, doesn't even come close to fitting my lock. It rattles uselessly in the keyhole, too thick, too short, and completely the wrong shape. Frustrated and red-faced, she snatches her phone and dials 911, shrieking that I threatened her, even though all I did was block her from barging into my house. What she didn't realize, what she couldn't possibly have known, is that the dispatcher who picked up her call wasn't just some random operator. It was someone who knew exactly who she was, someone who had been waiting for a moment like this. That one phone call. It would be the beginning of the end for Vivian's little HOA empire. And if you're watching this, trust me, you'll want to stick around for how this ends. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, because this revenge is absolutely perfect. It all started like any normal Tuesday evening in our quiet, two-story home on Maple Street. The sun was setting, casting that golden hour light through our living room window as Dylan, my son, and I sat on the couch digging into takeout Chinese food. You know the kind, greasy cartons packed tight, fortune cookies tossed in at random, and those tiny plastic sauce packets that either won't tear at all or explode all over your shirt when they finally do. Dylan had just gotten home from his EMT shift, and we were catching up about his day when an envelope slid under the door, not slipped gently, but shoved with the kind of force that screamed hostility. Bright yellow, HOA letterhead, and bad news before I even opened it. I picked it up and sighed, already feeling the familiar burn of HOA nonsense bubbling in my stomach. Sure enough, a $500 fine. Fence violation. According to subsection 12B of the Fairview Heights Homeowner Guidelines, my perfectly normal wooden fence was 3 inches too tall. 3 inches. I crumpled the letter, tossed it onto the kitchen counter, and muttered a few words I won't repeat here. Dylan just rolled his eyes and jabbed his chopsticks into his orange chicken a little harder than necessary. We both knew who was behind it. Vivian Baxter, the self-appointed queen of compliance. Then came the pounding. Not knocking, pounding, like a battering ram. Through the peephole, I spotted her. Vivian, in all her theatrical glory, standing on my porch in oversized sunglasses even though the sun was basically gone, a glittery handbag clutched like a trophy, and that absurd neon key swinging from her fingers like a weapon. Her outfit looked like it came from a catalog called Corporate Combat, high heels sharp enough to stab someone, and a blazer stiff enough to serve as body armor. Her platinum blonde hair hadn't moved in the breeze. It was shellacked into perfection, and her voice, piercing enough to rattle window panes. "Open up, Ryan Caldwell," she screamed, the key raised like she was about to knight me. "I have the master key that opens 90% of the homes in this development, and I'm not afraid to use it." I opened the door just a crack, just enough to step between her and my living room. "Evening, Vivian," I said coolly. "What brings you to my doorstep tonight, aside from inflated self-importance and questionable hardware?" Behind me, Dylan had gone silent. I could feel him back there, probably recording everything on his phone. Smart kid, always thinking. Vivian, without hesitation, jabbed the key forward like it was some kind of enchanted object. The thing practically glowed, highlighter green, cartoonish, and completely incompatible with any known lock in North America. "This," she announced, like she was presenting a Nobel Prize, "is a universal master key. I purchased it from a reputable online security firm. It opens all standard residential locks. Since you ignored my citation, I am conducting a full inspection of your property, effective immediately." I stared at her. The sheer absurdity of her words hovered in the air like a bad smell. "Vivian," I said, arms crossed, voice calm. "Did this reputable firm also sell you magic beans and a golden goose? Because that thing looks like it belongs in a Halloween store." She huffed, cheeks flushing as she tried to jam the key into my lock. It didn't go, not even close. She jiggled and twisted, muttering about defective products and fake reviews. It was pathetic and a little hilarious. "Ma'am," I said firmly, "you need to leave my property. You are not authorized to enter my home. I don't care if you have a neon key or the sword of King Arthur." That's when she pulled her phone from her handbag, flicking her hair as she hit the screen like she was summoning backup. "We'll see about that," she snapped. "I'm calling the police. Right now? You're threatening me. You're harassing me. I'm the HOA president." She punched in the number, sighing loudly with every press like she was suffering the weight of the world. As she launched into her dramatic performance, Dylan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, smirked, and quietly walked to his room. I figured he just wanted to avoid the coming storm. On Vivian's speakerphone, a calm voice responded. 911. "What's your emergency?" Without missing a beat, Vivian dove into her speech. "Yes, hello. This is Vivian Baxter, president of the Fairview Heights Homeowners Association. I'm at 47 Maple Street, and the homeowner, Ryan Caldwell, is threatening me. He's being aggressive and won't let me carry out my legal responsibilities as HOA president. I need officers immediately." I didn't say a word. I knew better than to feed her fire. What I didn't know was that, 3 blocks away in a local dispatch center, my son Dylan was leaning back in his chair with his headset on, listening to her every word. A slow grin was spreading across his face. "Ma'am," the dispatcher replied carefully. "Can you describe the nature of the threat? Are you in immediate danger?" Vivian faltered, caught off guard. He's standing there menacingly. "And he said my master key was fake." There was a pause on the line. Then the voice came back, neutral but inquisitive. "Ma'am, did you say master key? Can you describe this key? Is it registered with the National Locksmith Guild?" I had to press my lips together to keep from laughing. Vivian's mouth dropped open. She blinked. The what?" I don't know. It's from masterkeysdirect.com. They said it works on all doors." Another pause. "Ma'am, I need the make and model of the key for our records. We've had multiple reports of illegal locksmith tools being sold online." That's when Vivian lost it. Her designer bag tumbled from her shoulder, scattering makeup and loose pins all over my porch. Lipsticks rolled into the flower bed. HOA citation pads, at least 3, fanned out across the concrete. She looked like a suburban disaster zone. "I don't understand. It's just a key. A master key. The website said it was universal." She was yelling now. Her heels clacked as she stomped across the porch, pacing like a general on the battlefield. Neighbors had started watching. I saw heads peeking from curtains, cameras raised behind window panes, kids on bikes pausing at the curb. Vivian was too locked into her tantrum to notice her growing audience. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Dylan. "Got this, Dad." That's when it clicked. My son, the voice on the other end of her call, was stringing her along, carefully, legally, and beautifully. Part of me wanted to call it off, to avoid any blowback, but another part, the part that had endured Vivian's tyranny, threats, and citations for years, wanted to see how far she would dig her own grave. And dig she did, with flair. Vivian stopped pacing and slowly pulled a small camera from her bag. She positioned it carefully, aiming it at my door like she was about to film a crime documentary. Sirens echoed faintly in the distance. And right then, she made the biggest mistake of her life. Me, staring at the approaching police lights, could feel dread setting deep in my chest. Whatever Vivian Baxter had in mind, I just knew, deep down, that her so-called master key was only the opening act in whatever twisted performance she had planned tonight. I could see it unfolding already, the way she stood with that self-satisfied smirk, her camera already rolling like she was about to film an award-winning tragedy. The question pounding in my mind was simple, yet terrifying. What kind of elaborate, manipulative scene was she about to stage, and how was I supposed to protect both myself and my son from whatever chaos she had cooked up? Officer Greg Turner stepped out of his patrol car with the slow, tired movements of a man who'd been down this road too many times. I recognized him right away. He was a veteran cop, the kind with gray streaks near his temples, deep creases etched around his eyes, and the weary demeanor of someone who'd been forced to mediate one too many of Vivian's neighborhood theatrics. He didn't even look surprised to see her, just resigned. And the moment he spotted her, standing there like the star of her own twisted drama, the lines in his face only seemed to deepen. She didn't waste a second. With the flair of someone who'd rehearsed this monologue in the mirror, Vivian instantly went into full victim mode. She pulled out a lace handkerchief, God knows from where, and began dramatically dabbing at eyes that weren't even remotely wet. "Officer Turner, thank goodness you're here," she said breathlessly, her voice trembling just enough to sound practiced. Then she turned and pointed directly at me, her hand shaking like she was accusing a criminal mastermind. "This man has been terrorizing me," she declared. Her voice was pitched loud enough for the growing crowd of neighbors to hear. Then came the kicker. Like a gunslinger in an old western, she whipped out her phone and held it up triumphantly, showing Officer Turner a photo that made my jaw practically hit the pavement. On her screen was a picture of a house surrounded by a glaringly neon pink fence. The color alone was enough to burn your retinas from across the street. And apparently, this was supposed to be my house. But even a quick glance told me it was a fake. The house number was wrong. The window placements were all off. And unless my tall old maple tree had decided to turn into a tropical palm overnight, it was clearly a different property. But in the dim evening light, with just porch lights and street lamps casting shadows, Turner squinted at the photo, his expression slowly morphing from confused to suspicious. He glanced from the image to my completely ordinary brown wooden fence, then back again, his eyes narrowing. "Mr. Caldwell," he said carefully, his tone as neutral as he could manage, "I'm going to need to hear your side of this. Mrs. Baxter is claiming you violated multiple HOA regulations and threatened her when she attempted to bring them to your attention." Behind him, Vivian was really laying it on thick. She had shifted into full-on Victorian melodrama, clutching that same handkerchief to her chest and swaying like she might faint at any moment. Her camera's red light continued blinking, silently recording every moment, like a quiet witness with no emotion. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to remain calm. Losing my temper would only feed into her narrative. "Officer," I said, my voice measured, "I've lived here for 15 years. That photo she's waving around is doctored. Look at the house number. It says 53. I live at 47. And last I checked, palm trees don't grow in Ohio." Turner frowned again, lifting her phone a little higher toward the street lamp, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Meanwhile, more neighbors had begun gathering, stepping onto their porches and driveways, forming little clusters of silent witnesses. Henry Walsh leaned on his fence 2 doors down, his face twisted into a grimace of disbelief. On the opposite porch, Sophia Alvarez stood with her daughter, both of them clearly fed up with Vivian's antics. The whole street had tuned in for the show, and Vivian, true to form, was loving every minute of it. "Officer," Vivian said again, louder this time, practically projecting her voice toward the stars, "Mr. Caldwell has been a problem since the day he showed up to that HOA meeting and tried to humiliate me. He openly challenged our fence regulations in front of everyone, deliberately trying to undermine my authority. He's just like that awful old man who used to live in his house. Always picking fights, always questioning everything I do." That was when it clicked. 2 years ago, Vivian had been locked in a bitter battle with Frank Morrison, the previous owner of my home. He'd been just as skeptical of her self-appointed authority and had fought her every step of the way. I remember the stories, how he'd called her out in front of the whole community for misusing HOA funds. The man had guts. Eventually, he'd moved to Florida, but not before completely embarrassing her in a packed meeting hall. And now it was obvious she had transferred every ounce of that old hatred onto me. I pulled out my phone and quickly texted my son. "Dylan, send me the HOA bylaws, ASAP. She's trying to force entry." Within moments, he responded with a PDF. I opened it, quickly skimming to the relevant section. "Officer Turner," I said, holding up my phone, "I'd like to read you Section 8, Subsection C of the HOA bylaws. It clearly states, 'No HOA board member shall enter a resident's property without written consent or a court order. Violations of this policy may result in criminal trespass charges.'" Vivian knows this. She helped write these rules. The effect was almost instantaneous. Vivian's grip on her handkerchief tightened. A pink flush crept up beneath her foundation, and she suddenly looked very unsure of herself. Her mouth opened and closed like she was gasping for air, completely unprepared for being publicly caught in her own web. Turner took the phone from my hand and read the section silently. When he finished, he looked at Vivian, raising his eyebrows. "Ma'am," he said, calm but firm, "were you aware of this policy?" Vivian sputtered. "That's not." He's twisting the wording. "I have a master key. I'm allowed to inspect properties for compliance." Turner's expression changed. He wasn't buying it. "Mrs. Baxter, I am not your personal code enforcer. If you believe Mr. Caldwell is in violation, You must follow proper procedure. Attempting to enter his property with a key, especially one not legally authorized, is not acceptable. Murmurs swept through the crowd. I heard someone whisper, "Didn't she try that same stunt with the Johnsons?" Another muttered, "That woman is completely unhinged." And just then, Henry Walsh spoke up, his gravelly voice carrying over the low chatter. "Hey Turner, since you're here, you should know Vivian fined me $200 this morning. Said I was siding with a rule violator." All I did was wave at Ryan. Turner's face shifted into something close to disgust as he turned back to Vivian. "Ma'am," he said flatly, "I think it's time for you to go home. If you have legitimate concerns, file them through the proper channels. As for this photo," he handed her the phone, "I would think twice before presenting manipulated images again. That's a serious allegation and could land you in legal trouble." Just then, her phone lit up with a message. Her eyes flicked down, reading something that clearly startled her. Her fingers flew over the screen, responding in a frenzy, and I heard her muttering something about eviction proceedings and by morning. She was spiraling. Badly. She gathered her things with trembling hands, stuffing lipstick tubes and her little citation pads into her overpriced bag. The camera was the last thing she packed, and she made a dramatic show of stopping it, as if it had captured something damning. As Officer Turner stepped aside to remind me to call the station if anything else happened, Vivian stood beside her gaudy luxury SUV, glaring at me with pure hatred. "This isn't over, Caldwell," she hissed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You think you're so clever with your bylaws and that smug attitude. But I know things about you." I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because at that moment, everyone in the neighborhood saw her for who she really was. And whatever game she was playing, it had just backfired. Badly. By the time tomorrow morning hits, this whole neighborhood will be turned against you. You'll be begging, for a chance to leave quietly. That's what she said before climbing into her SUV, slamming the door so violently it made the windows on the street tremble. Her taillights vanished into the dark as she sped off around the corner. I stood frozen on my porch, coffee cooling in my hand, wondering what kind of ammunition she believed she had, what kind of poison she planned to inject into the community overnight, and more importantly, how far she was willing to go to satisfy her bruised ego. Deep down, I had a feeling the answer wasn't far off. In fact, it might come knocking sooner than I'd like. The next morning was eerily quiet. Not peaceful, ominous. It was the kind of quiet that made your skin itch, like the world was holding its breath. Around 9 a.m., I walked over to Sofia Alvarez's house, coffee in hand like a peace offering. I hated disturbing her morning, but something told me I needed backup. She opened the door in her pajamas. Her 8-year-old daughter Maria latched onto her leg like a shadow. But when she saw it was me, her face softened instantly. "Ryan, come in," she said, stepping aside. "I was just thinking about calling you, after last night's little performance art piece from our beloved president." Her living room was a cozy storm of motherhood. Toys scattered across the floor, a tiny stuffed unicorn on the couch, and medical textbooks stacked in uneven towers on the coffee table. Sophia was juggling a life most would crumble under: single motherhood, 12-hour ER shifts, and the daily mental grind of dealing with an HOA tyrant. As Maria darted off to her room, Sophia collapsed onto the couch and hugged her knees, her face folding into an expression I'd never seen on her: raw, exhausted vulnerability. "You know, Ryan," she began, her voice low, "I need to tell you something." She paused for a breath. 3 months ago, Vivian stood up at the HOA meeting and just laid into me. For 20 straight minutes. About my mailbox. She shook her head with disbelief. My mailbox. Said it was half an inch too close to the sidewalk. That the numbers weren't the approved font. She made me stand there like a criminal while she passed around photos to everyone. Humiliated me like I was some sort of blight on the neighborhood. Her voice cracked, just slightly, and she glanced toward the hallway as if making sure Maria wasn't listening. I haven't slept right since. Every time I hear a car door slam, I think it's her, coming to hand me another violation slip. Maria's been asking me why mommy jumps every time the doorbell rings. That admission landed like a punch. This woman was ironclad, resilient, capable, a damn warrior in scrubs. And yet Vivian had reduced her to someone who flinched at car doors. If Vivian had gotten this deep under her skin, who else was suffering silently? Sophia seemed to read my mind. But here's the thing, Ryan. I didn't just take it. A spark returned to her eyes. Remember I told you I'd been brushing up on computer stuff? She grabbed her laptop, fingers moving like a hacker in a movie. After my ex tried to hide money in our divorce, I taught myself how to find things online. Public records, social media patterns, basic digital trails. Nothing illegal, just useful. And Vivian, she's not as stealthy as she thinks she is. The screen came alive with screenshots, social media posts, spreadsheet files, even Venmo transactions. Look at this, she said, pointing to the screen. Every month, there are these strange payments labeled HOA Beautification Fund. But then, look, she's spending money at luxury stores the next day. And this, she pulled up a leaked email. This is from a data breach. She's been messaging the treasurer about something called Project Clean Sweep. Mentions you by name, Ryan. Says you're contaminating the neighborhood culture, just like Frank Morrison did. My stomach dropped. This wasn't about a petty fence line or mailbox placement. This was something deeper, something coordinated. It was systemic, targeted, and laced with financial motives. Before I could even react, there was a knock at the door. Sophia peeked through the peephole, her expression sharpening. Speak of the cavalry. She opened the door, revealing Henry Walsh, a grizzled, broad-shouldered man in his 60s. A retired mechanic with hands built for engine blocks, but eyes that now shimmered with fury. That woman, he roared, not even saying hello first. She fined me $500 for my Elizabeth tree. We stared in confusion. She says it's an unauthorized memorial installation. Today is the anniversary. 5 years since I lost her. I planted that oak tree for her. Her ashes are in the roots. There's a plaque. And Vivian sends me a violation notice today. Today. His hands trembled as he held up the crumpled notice. His voice faltered. I'm done playing nice. Whatever you two are planning, count me in. And I can bring more. The Martins. The Thompsons. The whole Peterson clan. We're sick of her. All of us. He pulled out his phone and showed us a group chat already buzzing. Stories. Screenshots. Outrage. Solidarity. She finds someone for the wrong shade of white on their window trim. Told old Mrs. Patterson to remove her wheelchair ramp because it wasn't pre-approved. Tried to ban kids from playing outside in front yards. Claimed it violated community aesthetics. Enough is enough. Sophia's nurse instincts kicked in, logical, precise, ready for battle. We need to be smart about this, she said. Ryan, she's going to call the cops on you again. She escalates. That's her pattern. Henry, you're probably next. Almost on cue, the distant sound of sirens grew louder. Sophia yanked her laptop back open. Look at this. She sent an email at 2 a.m. to the board. She's proposing an emergency HOA fee, $1,000 per household, for legal costs related to covenant enforcement. And look, this attachment. She opened a spreadsheet. At the top of the list, my name. The column title, Priority Enforcement Targets. Next to my name, a note about using the fees to pursue legal action against me. The sirens were closer now. A squad car rolled slowly down the block, headlights sweeping across Sophia's living room. That's for you, Henry muttered. Bet my last dollar she's called you in again. Sophia was already on her feet, tablet in hand, recording everything. Ryan, call your son. If she's dialing 911 again, we need backup. I texted Dylan in a blur. His response popped up seconds later. Already saw the call come in. Same caller ID. She's saying you're disturbing the peace and conspiring against her. I've got it handled. As I stepped onto the porch to face whatever new drama Vivian had cooked up, I heard Henry behind me, voice trembling. That tree meant everything to Elizabeth. She picked that spot so she could see it from her hospice bed. Vivian knew that. She knew, and she fined me anyway. On our anniversary. He paused, voice hardening like steel. This ends now. No more hiding. No more fear. Whatever it takes, we're ending this. Across the street, a neighbor's security camera blinked red, recording everything. The three of us standing on that porch, united. None of us knew yet how important that moment would be. How that clip would become the turning point. But before the reckoning, we had to survive whatever she was about to throw at us next. The moment I approached, I could already tell this was going to be far worse than a photoshopped fence scandal. The shrill echo of Vivian's voice pierced the air from across the street, her words carrying all the way from her front porch like an air raid siren. She was on her phone again, loud, theatrical, impossible to ignore. "Yes, I need to report a conspiracy," she practically shouted, pacing in tight circles like a general under siege. "They're plotting to undermine my authority. This is nothing short of harassment. Harassment of an elected HOA official." Her voice hit a pitch that made nearby dogs bark, and I had to stop myself from groaning aloud. Right then, my phone buzzed. A message from my son, Dylan. "She's really going for it," it read. "She's claiming you're inciting a riot. Want me to play the dictionary definition of riot over a speaker?" Even in the chaos, I smiled. Dylan had a knack for diffusing madness with dry wit. He was handling it brilliantly, using Vivian's own flair for drama against her in a way she couldn't even recognize as a trap. But the humor drained quickly when I noticed the police officer approaching. In his hands were several sheets of paper, and my heart sank. This situation was spiraling out of control faster than any of us had predicted. What started as petty intimidation was evolving into something more dangerous, more official. Vivian wasn't backing down. In fact, she was doubling down, turning up the volume, and now she had law enforcement at her side. Sophia placed a calming hand on my shoulder as I stepped forward to meet my fate. "Remember," she whispered, her voice low and firm, "we've got evidence now. She's not the only one who knows how to document things." Behind us, Henry was already pulling out his phone, texting neighbors and rallying support like a commander mustering troops. It was happening. The line had been drawn in the sand. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I actually believed we had a fighting chance. The only question was, could we move fast enough to expose Vivian's corruption before she managed to destroy everything I'd built, and anyone else who dared stand against her? As I stepped into my driveway to greet the officer, I caught a glimpse of Vivian peeking through her curtain, watching like a hawk. No doubt her home security camera was recording every second, probably uploaded to a private server she imagined only she controlled. Let her record. Let her think she had the upper hand. She had no clue what was coming for her. That night, the Fairview Heights Community Center was packed tighter than a fire code violation. Every folding chair had been claimed early, and dozens stood against the walls, crowding the exits, murmuring like spectators before a heavyweight fight. The air was thick with suspicion and anticipation, humming with barely contained anger. And at the center of it all, front and arrogant, stood Vivian Baxter, clenching a remote control like it was the scepter of a self-appointed queen. She was dressed like she was about to deliver a TED Talk on authoritarianism, in a glossy power suit that probably cost more than most folks' mortgages. Her helmet of blonde hair was sprayed and sculpted to perfection, defying both wind and reason. With a flick of her wrist, the projector screen behind her came to life. And then I saw it. What she'd been preparing. Grainy footage filled the screen. A figure, supposedly me, spray painting a fence in blinding neon pink. The image was so low quality, it looked like it had been captured on a 2005 flip phone, but in the darkened hall, with the right kind of lighting and Vivian's smug narration, it might as well have been courtroom footage. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice slathered in performative concern. "This is what Ryan Caldwell does in the dead of night. This is the man who dares to call himself a responsible member of our community." The audience murmured, some gasped, others shook their heads in disbelief. Outside, I could hear a distant chant rising, and through the large windows at the back of the hall, I spotted something that made my chest tighten. A small crowd, 15, maybe 20 people, marching past my house with signs. "Evict the vandal," read one. "Save our property values," read another. Someone had even gone so far as to print a full-color banner with my face on it, crossed out with a giant red X. It was surreal, like a parody of suburban life turned grotesque reality. And through it all, Vivian basked in the attention. Then, without hesitation, Sophia rose beside me, her tablet in hand like a sword drawn from its sheath. "I'd like to present a counter-argument," she announced, her voice slicing through the murmurs like a bell. She connected her device to the projector and, within seconds, a different kind of slideshow began. No shaky footage or blurry frames this time. Just cold, hard receipts. Vivian's emails. Dozens of them. Digital proof of discretionary spending from HOA accounts, on luxury items, handbags, and worst of all, a $799 universal access device she'd charged to the community card. "It's a toy," Sophia said bluntly. She spent HOA money on a glorified toy key that does nothing. Gasps filled the room. Even the officer who had been guarding the door glanced over with widened eyes. Vivian's iron grip on the narrative was slipping fast. Then Henry stood. His voice was low and furious. "Since we're sharing evidence," he said, stepping forward, "let's talk about the Ring camera footage from Tuesday night." The video changed again, and there she was, Vivian, caught crystal clear on someone's security camera, sneaking into the HOA office at 2 in the morning, carrying boxes of documents. "What were you doing there, Vivian?" Henry asked. "Hosting a secret slumber party?" The crowd was shifting now. Phones were out, recording, live streaming. And right then, I watched it happen. The moment Vivian's composure cracked. Her cheeks flushed. Her jaw clenched. And then she lost it. She slammed her palm on the podium with enough force to rattle the mic. "You don't understand," she shrieked, her voice shattering any illusion of professionalism. "I did it for you. All of you. Do you know what happens when neighborhoods have no strong leadership? They crumble. They rot." She was pacing now, her high heels echoing across the tile like warning shots. "That money wasn't stolen. It was invested. That key was meant to protect you. To protect this entire community from people like him." She pointed a trembling finger at me. "He's just like Frank Morrison. Always questioning. Always undermining. Well, not this time. I won't be disrespected by some electrician who thinks he knows how to run a neighborhood." Her rant turned into a scream. She grabbed her clipboard and slammed it again, papers flying like confetti. "I've given everything for this place. My weekends. My reputation. And this is how you thank me? By siding with him." A neighbor in the back, someone I didn't even know, was live streaming the whole meltdown. It was going viral in real time, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. "Fine," she shrieked, her voice cracking under the weight of her collapse. "You'll all regret this. Just wait until your property values nosedive and criminals start camping in your yards." I rose from my seat, letting the silence fall around me. "The only thing you manage, Vivian," I said, voice steady and calm, "is chaos. You've weaponized the rules, turned neighbors into enemies, and stolen from the very people you swore to protect. You're not a leader, you're a tyrant." The crowd exploded. Cheers, chants, shouts of "resign. Resign," rising like a tidal wave. But then I saw something that froze me mid-breath. Patricia, the quiet, always nervous treasurer, was slipping out the side door, clutching a laptop bag like it held nuclear codes. She looked scared, desperate, and Vivian saw her too. She stopped mid-scream, snatched her phone from the podium, and began typing furiously. Even from across the room, I could see her fingers shaking. "This isn't over," she yelled. "You'll see. By tomorrow, Ryan Caldwell will be exposed for what he is. I have friends, resources, people who owe me favors. You've all made a terrible mistake." With that, she grabbed her designer handbag, shoved past the crowd, and stormed toward the exit. But not before that livestream camera caught one final image. Her face, frozen in rage and fear, a mask shattered before the entire community. Close up on a face streaked with smeared makeup, wild eyes darting. If ever there was a perfect thumbnail for chaos, this was it. This wasn't just drama. It was the making of the most watched video in Fairview Heights history. The community meeting had fully descended into madness. Board members were shouting over each other, desperate to restore order that had already slipped away. Neighbors were arguing openly, tempers flaring like dry brush in a wildfire. Amidst the commotion, Sophia grabbed my arm tightly, her voice low but urgent as she leaned in. "Patricia," she said, eyes locked on someone across the room. "We need to find out what she's planning. That woman, she's been Vivian's accomplice this whole time." Before I could respond, Henry appeared beside me, his face flushed, adrenaline still coursing through him from the confrontation. "Let them try," he said, teeth clenched. "After tonight, no one's going to believe a word Vivian says." But even as he spoke, a knot tightened in my gut. I wasn't so sure. People don't just walk away from power, not when they've been humiliated in front of an entire neighborhood. Desperate people cling harder. They double down. And Vivian had just lost everything she built, everything she controlled. That made her unpredictable. That made her dangerous. As we made our way out of the community center, still buzzing from the fallout of what had just happened, my phone buzzed with a message from Dylan. "Dad, you need to see this. Vivian just called someone about implementing the nuclear option." I froze. The nuclear option? My eyes drifted back toward the community center, where neighbors were still lingering, whispering, processing the implosion they'd just witnessed. This wasn't over. If anything, we were entering a more volatile chapter. Vivian had nothing to lose now, and that made her capable of anything. I just hoped we'd be ready for whatever came next. At exactly 6 a.m., my phone exploded with noise, not texts, not social media pings. This was different. Every screen in the house lit up at once. It was an emergency broadcast pushed through the HOA system, something most of us had forgotten existed. Even my old tablet chimed from the back of the kitchen drawer. Patricia's shrill voice poured through every speaker like a bad dream. "Attention Fairview Heights residents," she began. "This is an urgent security notice. Ryan Caldwell of 47 Maple Street has been identified as a severe threat to community safety and property values. Evidence has surfaced of vandalism, threatening behavior, and financial irregularities. An emergency assessment of $15,000 per household is required immediately to pursue legal action and protect our community. Failure to pay within 24 hours will result in immediate lien proceedings." I sat up so fast I nearly fell out of bed. My heart pounded as I stared at the ceiling, trying to comprehend what I'd just heard. $15,000? From every household? It was insane. That wasn't a security measure. It was extortion. Most families in Fairview Heights couldn't scrape together a quarter of that without falling into debt. This wasn't just personal. It was a declaration of war. Before I could even process my next move, another message from Dylan arrived. "Dad, I'm tracking multiple 911 calls about this broadcast. People are panicking. Also, Vivian just called in again, said you're harassing her. Want me to play the recording I saved?" I stared at the screen, stunned by the foresight of my son. Dylan had been preparing for this. He'd been quietly collecting audio evidence, documenting every unhinged call from Vivian during his shifts as a dispatcher. Within minutes, Sophia burst through the door, still in her scrubs from a long night shift. Her hair was a mess, her eyes bloodshot, but her expression was pure fire. "Did you see this?" she asked, holding up her phone with the broadcast message still blinking on the screen. "But here's the interesting part," she continued. "Remember when the cops showed up the first time? Vivian got a text that made her go pale? That was me." She grinned, fierce and proud. "I used a burner phone. Sent her a message implying I knew about her embezzlement. Just wanted to see how she'd react. And oh, she reacted. Then came Henry, looking like he hadn't slept a second. 'Ryan, they cut my power,' he said, trembling with fury. 'I went to make coffee this morning, and nothing worked. Called the utility company. They said the HOA placed a stop order due to unpaid fees. Fees I never even got billed for. That crossed a line. HOAs had power. Yes, but not this kind. Cutting electricity? That was a whole new level of dangerous.' I reached for my phone to call Dylan again, but my screen stayed black. My own power had just gone out. For a moment, we all stood in the eerie silence of a house gone dead. No refrigerator hum. No heater. Then, in the distance, sirens. Again. "She's completely lost it," Sophia whispered, already pulling up footage on her tablet. "But she's sloppy. Look, traffic cam shows her SUV in the community center lot. She's calling 911 from her car. Not even home." On her screen, we could see Vivian gesturing wildly, screaming into her phone. Dylan patched himself into the call on speaker. "Ma'am," his calm dispatcher voice began. "You're reporting harassment, but our system shows you're in the community center parking lot. Can you explain that?" Vivian shrieked back, her voice cracking with rage. "I don't have to explain anything. Ryan Caldwell is destroying this community." But Dylan was ready. He played back old recordings of her 911 calls. Her voice filled the room, over and over. One demanding an officer for a memorial tree she called a code violation. Another claiming Sophia harbored anti-HOA sentiment. Yet another reporting that Thompson's kids were playing outside too loudly. The recordings played one after another, echoing through our devices, painting a crystal-clear picture of a woman abusing emergency systems for personal vendettas. The present-day Vivian fell silent. It was the silence of someone who realized they'd been caught, by their own words. Just then, the lights flickered back on. My phone rang. It was Officer Turner. His voice was tired, but steady. "Mr. Caldwell, I'm at the community center. Mrs. Baxter just admitted to ordering the power cuts. says it was necessary to maintain order. State authorities are en route. This goes way beyond our pay grade now. From my window, I saw neighbors emerging, confused and upset. Some were already walking toward the community center, drawn by the sirens and spectacle. The broadcast, the false accusations, it had backfired. Turner continued, that message this morning triggered dozens of calls to the state HOA fraud hotline. They're very interested in Vivian and her treasurer. Then Dylan's voice returned, crackling with emotion for the first time. Dad, I need to tell you something. I've been recording everything. Every call, every threat, every abuse of the system. I didn't tell you because I wanted to handle it myself. I wanted to prove I could do something that mattered. But once she started targeting you, I couldn't just sit back anymore. His voice wavered. I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner. Tears filled my eyes. My son, barely 19, had been quietly defending not just me, but our entire neighborhood. A one-man resistance behind a dispatcher's desk. Dylan, I said, voice thick with pride and emotion, you've done more than I ever could have imagined. Emotions surged as I told him, you have nothing to apologize for. You're the hero here. You saved us all. Through the phone, I could hear him trying to hold it together, a soft sniffle betraying the weight he'd carried. Then, as if flipping a switch, his tone shifted back to professional. Copy that, Dad. A pause. Oh, and Vivian's trying to call again. Should I let it go through? From the speaker, we could all hear Vivian's shrill voice demanding to speak to a supervisor, ranting that the entire dispatch center was somehow conspiring against her. Turner's voice came in dry and sharp, slicing through her chaos. Ma'am, accusing 911 dispatchers of conspiracy is a serious allegation. Would you like to add that to your growing list of charges? A beat passed, and then we heard the distinct sound of her coffee cup crashing to the floor. It was that loud. Even from inside my house, it was unmistakable. We stood in the kitchen, me, Sophia, and Henry, exhausted beyond belief, but oddly energized, like survivors after a storm. Then Sophia's tablet chimed with a new notification. She read it aloud, her voice tight with anticipation. The HOA board just sent an emergency alert. They're suspending Vivian and Patricia pending investigation. All HOA accounts have been frozen, and the $15,000 assessment has been officially canceled. For the first time in days, Henry allowed himself a smile. Good, he said, but his tone sobered almost immediately. She's not done yet. People like Vivian always have one more card to play. And right on cue, Dylan's voice came back through the line. Dad, Vivian just said something about having dirt on you, something about your work history. She's claiming she's going to expose you at the emergency HOA meeting tonight. My stomach turned to ice. There was nothing in my work history to be ashamed of, nothing scandalous or unethical. But Vivian had already proven she wasn't above manufacturing evidence if it suited her narrative. What lies would she conjure up now? And after everything, would people still believe her? The emergency meeting that night was less like a gathering and more like a circus already mid-performance. News of Vivian's morning broadcast demanding $15,000 from every resident, and the resulting chaos, had spread across Fairview Heights like dry brush fire. It felt like every single homeowner had shown up to the community center, buzzing with anger, curiosity, and a thirst for justice. But this time, it wasn't just local. This wasn't just some neighborhood spat anymore. Parked outside the building was a news van from a major local station. A reporter with immaculate hair and a microphone in hand was interviewing fired-up residents, each eager to share their outrage. We arrived. Me, Sophia, and Henry, like reluctant celebrities, forced to push our way through the congested crowd just to reach the doors. Inside, the tension was suffocating. Officer Turner stood at the front, flanked by two sharp-eyed state investigators whose badges gleamed under the sterile fluorescent lights. Vivian sat at the board's table, but she looked diminished, stripped of the authority she once wielded. The rest of the board had physically distanced themselves, leaving her sitting alone at one end, like a defendant awaiting sentencing. In her trembling hands, she clutched that ridiculous neon green key, flipping it over and over like a nervous tick. The moment her eyes locked onto mine, her expression twisted into something between fury and fear. Patricia, the treasurer, was nowhere in sight. Word had it she'd already been taken in for questioning over discrepancies in the HOA's finances. Officer Turner raised his voice to cut through the chatter. Before we begin, I need to inform everyone that this meeting is being recorded as part of an ongoing investigation into misuse of emergency services and potential financial fraud. The reporter from outside had somehow slipped in, setting up her camera in a back corner. Vivian snapped to her feet, pointing wildly. No media. This is a private HOA matter. The reporter didn't even blink. Actually, ma'am, when you sent that broadcast demanding $15,000 from every household, you made this very public. Care to comment on the allegations of embezzlement? The room fell silent. It was like watching a grenade roll across the floor. Vivian's mouth opened, then closed again, her brain clearly scrambling for damage control. I don't have to answer to you, she finally said, voice cracking. This is about Ryan Caldwell and his criminal behavior. I have evidence. He's been falsifying electrical inspections, overcharging residents, and using his son's position to avoid punishment. The accusation was so outrageous, so off-base, that a few people actually laughed out loud. Mrs. Thompson, whose house I had rewired last year for barely above cost, stood up and said, Ryan gave us a 50% discount when my husband lost his job. He's the most honest person in this neighborhood. That's when I stepped forward. Calmly, I pulled out my phone. Speaking of evidence, I said, I think everyone here should hear this. Sophia's recording echoed through the room. Vivian's voice, crystal clear, admitting to engineering the power outages, demanding compliance, ranting about how she would ruin anyone who opposed her. And then, Dylan's voice chimed in, audio from her prior 911 calls. Each call played in sequence, one more absurd and petty than the last. I'm building a case, Vivian said in one of the calls. These people need to learn their place. Sophia stood next to me, tablet in hand, projecting call logs on the screen for all to see. Vivian Baxter has made 47 911 calls in 6 months, she said, her voice razor sharp. Not one of them was a real emergency. She's been using emergency services as a weapon against her neighbors. The data was undeniable. Henry had been targeted 5 times. The Thompsons, 7. Even poor Mrs. Patterson, elderly, wheelchair-bound, had been reported 3 separate times. The room boiled with outrage. You're a liar, Vivian. And we're done with you, Sophia declared, her finger pointed with the righteous fury of someone who had simply had enough. Then, Henry rose to his feet. Slowly, deliberately, he reached into his coat pocket. For a moment, Vivian looked afraid, genuinely afraid. But all he pulled out was a faded photograph, one that had clearly been handled countless times. It showed a woman smiling next to a sapling oak tree. This is my Elizabeth, he said, his voice heavy with grief and love. She passed away 5 years ago. That tree in my yard? She asked me to plant it so she could see something beautiful from her hospice bed. And you fined me $500 for it. On our anniversary. You knew what that tree meant. And you fined me anyway. The room was hushed. Even the cameras made no sound. Henry reached again into his coat and pulled out a thick manila folder. But you made a mistake, Vivian, he said, opening it. You made enemies out of good people. And good people fight back. Inside were petition pages, filled margin to margin with signatures. 237 households, Henry said firmly. That's 94% of the HOA. We're not just asking you to step down. We're demanding it. This is the voice of everyone you bullied, fined, and tried to silence. The applause was thunderous. People jumped to their feet, shouting, clapping, some even crying. It felt like a revolution. A fall from power, loud and emotional and long overdue. Then Officer Turner stepped forward again. The room quieted. Mrs. Baxter, he said, the state has formally opened an investigation into your conduct. The misuse of emergency services alone is a serious offense. When we add in the allegations of financial fraud, utility tampering, and potential falsification of records, we're looking at substantial legal consequences. Vivian had gone pale. Her grip on that absurd green key was tight enough to turn her knuckles white. I was protecting property values, she muttered weakly. I was maintaining standards. You people don't understand what this place was like before I took control. But no one was listening anymore. The expression on my face didn't even flicker. I looked Vivian dead in the eye and said flatly, I'm an officer, not your errand boy. And in that moment, the weight of everything came crashing down on her. From where I'm standing, I continued, The only thing you've been protecting is your own bank account." That was the moment the crowd truly turned. A reporter stepped forward, microphone in hand, voice sharp with purpose. "Mrs. Baxter," she asked, "do you have any comment on the allegations that you used HOA funds to purchase personal items, including what neighbors are calling a glow stick key?" Vivian's composure cracked like thin glass. She shot up from her chair so fast it clattered to the floor behind her. Her hand clutched that ridiculous neon key against her chest like it was sacred. Her eyes burned with rage as she shrieked, "You're all ungrateful idiots. I made this neighborhood what it is. Without me, you're nothing." She began to backpedal, weaving clumsily through the crowd, dodging cameras and microphones like a cornered animal. "I'll sue every last one of you. I have lawyers. I have connections. You think you've won? Think again. I'll be back, and when I am, you'll all beg for mercy." But her theatrical exit was cut short in the most poetic way possible, when she backed right into two state investigators waiting just beyond the door. One of them stepped forward, cool and calm. "Mrs. Baxter," he said, "we're going to need you to come with us. You have the right to remain silent." The rest of the Miranda warning was swallowed by Vivian's shrieking. Her voice was filled with outrage, screaming about conspiracies, betrayal, injustice. She struggled as they led her out of the building, still clutching that absurd green key like it was a lifeline. As she passed me, our eyes locked. There was a promise in her gaze, a vengeful glint that said this wasn't over, that somehow, some way, she'd find a way to make me pay. But would she really get that chance? Or had justice finally caught up with the woman who had terrorized Fairview Heights for far too long? The meeting didn't end, it transformed. With Vivian gone, the energy in the room shifted from tension to something closer to celebration. The board didn't waste a moment. They voted unanimously to suspend all recent fines, to refund every dollar they had wrongfully taken, and to create a permanent oversight system so this kind of abuse could never happen again. As people filtered out of the building, there were smiles, handshakes, even a few hugs. Stories were exchanged. Contact info was shared. We weren't just neighbors anymore. We were survivors, allies, maybe even friends. But as I walked back to my truck, something caught my eye. An envelope, tucked neatly beneath my windshield wiper. My name was written on it in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a single sheet of paper. One sentence. And that sentence sent a chill down my spine. But that's a story for another day. The final emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. the next evening, but by 6:30 the parking lot was already overflowing. Something had changed. This wasn't about drama anymore. This was about justice. I arrived with my usual crew, but this time we weren't just a small group. We were a movement. At least 50 families stood beside us, walking together into that building with heads high and eyes clear. Inside, the scene was surreal. State investigators now occupied the board table, with files and documents stacked neatly before them. Vivian sat at a small table off to the side, looking deflated beside a lawyer who seemed just as stressed as she did. Her precious neon green key sat on the table in front of her, no longer a symbol of power, but a sad, glowing relic of her delusions. Before anyone could even call the meeting to order, Henry strode to the front of the room, gripping a thick manila folder. "I've got something to say," he announced. He held up page after page of flyers, proof of everything. He, Ryan, and Sophia had spent all day distributing them to every single household. "Everyone now knows the truth," he declared. "The theft, the fake emergency calls, the broadcast scam, all of it. And more importantly," he held up a thick document. "This petition has 237 signatures demanding Mrs. Baxter's immediate removal and criminal prosecution." The crowd murmured in support, the energy palpable. He lowered his voice and added, "This is for you, Elizabeth," tapping his shirt pocket where her photo rested close to his heart. The state investigator nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Now, Mrs. Baxter, you called this meeting to present evidence against Mr. Caldwell. You have 5 minutes." Vivian lunged to her feet, knocking over her water glass. "Ryan Caldwell is a fraud," she screamed. "I have proof that he overcharged Mrs. Williams for electrical work 3 years ago, and his son, his delinquent son, has been sabotaging me from the start." Her evidence? A pile of blurry photos and receipts that, hilariously, proved I had undercharged for that job. But then, something shifted in her face. A realization hit her like a bolt of lightning. "That was your son's voice on those 911 calls," she gasped, pointing at me with a trembling hand. "It was him. You planned this." And right on cue, Dylan stepped into the room wearing his dispatcher uniform. Calm, composed, and unshaken. He walked straight up to the table with a folder in hand. "Ma'am," he said, "I was doing my job. You're the one who chose to abuse the emergency system. I just made sure there was a record." He handed the folder to the state investigator. "This is my formal report. 47 fraudulent calls, all documented." The investigator's face darkened as she turned each page. Henry couldn't resist. "That glow stick key didn't open our eyes, Vivian. You did that all by yourself." The room erupted in laughter, and that laughter shattered the last piece of Vivian's fragile composure. The board voted to remove her from her position immediately. The state fined her $20,000 and banned her from ever serving on any HOA board again. As Officer Turner moved to escort her out, she grabbed her key in one final act of desperation. "This isn't over," she shouted. "I'll appeal. I'll sue." But no one was listening. The spell had broken. The nightmare was finally over. That night, Dylan, Sophia, Henry, and I gathered at my house. Pizza boxes covered the kitchen table, and for the first time in what felt like forever, we laughed without fear. "You know what the best part is?" Henry asked, lifting his beer. "That tree of mine, it's going to outlive her legacy." We all laughed harder than we had in weeks. A few folks approached me about joining the new board. I wasn't sure, but Sophia and Henry encouraged me to attend the next meeting, even if just to listen. It felt like a fresh start, like Fairview Heights had been reborn. Later, Dylan pulled me aside. We stepped onto the porch under the quiet stars. "Dad, I'm sorry I didn't tell you about the dispatcher job sooner. I wanted to prove I could do something important." I pulled him into a hug, overwhelmed with pride. "You didn't just do something important. You saved this entire neighborhood. You're a hero, son." He grinned. "So, does this mean I'm off the hook for mowing the lawn this weekend?" We both laughed, just as I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. An envelope, tucked under the doormat. My name was scrawled across the front in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside, a single chilling line: "Fairview Heights isn't done with you." But I looked around, at my son, my friends, my home. We were safe now. Vivian was gone. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. We'd already taken down one tyrant. If more were coming, so be it. The state investigator had mentioned a bigger probe into HOA corruption across Ohio. Maybe Vivian was just the beginning. But that letter? That could wait until morning. Tonight, we'd won. Tonight, Fairview Heights was finally free. And if you've made it this far, you know how wild it got. Did we learn anything? Maybe not. But it sure was one hell of a ride. If you enjoyed it, give this story a like, and don't forget to subscribe to exclusive HOA stories.